So today we are getting from Planner our assignee names, our subtasks, and our bucket names. And this is the third version of this video, so we have streamlined it quite a bit from last time, and I've added in the subtasks. Somebody was asking for that in the comments last time. This time we are specifically not going to use the parse JSON action. We're just going to use the raw list tasks for our iteration, and that should solve a lot of problems people are having with the parsing. Here's our starter flow. If you do not have these three actions in your flow, check out the prior video. I'm going to link that in the description to get this far. We're going to add to this existing workflow. So we're going to add 2 initialize variable steps. So we need something to store our data in that we are getting. So I'm going to initialize 2 array variables. So one is going to be called assignees. I'm going to rename these steps. And then we're going to do another variable for our subtasks. And this is an array variable also. And then we're going to go down past our list task step here, right below it, and we're going to do an apply to each loop. And by the way, I have a text version of this flow on my blog, so if you follow along better with some pictures and text to follow, check that out. I'm going to link it in the video description. And we are going to apply to each value from the list tasks action, and we want just the word value, which is at the very bottom of this list. So this one right here. So that means for each of our tasks, we are going to get task details, and the task details is where the subtasks are. And for the task ID, instead of selecting something from this drop-down list, we're going to go to enter custom value, and we're going to select the value ID, and we're going to take those task details and we're going to append them to an array variable. So what append is doing is it's basically tacking this information onto a variable for each task instead of replacing it each time. So select your subtasks variable here, and for the value, what you want is the body of the get task details step. So I'm gonna put in body here and make sure you select the right one. So you want the one from the task details, and then I'm going to rename this. So that gets our subtasks. Now we need to get our assignee names, because all we got from the list tasks step was the assignee IDs. And the thing with the assignees is that there can be more than one. So you can't just get the profile for the assignee field. You have to iterate over that assignees field and get the name for each person in the assignees field. So we need to add another apply to each loop here. We should probably rename this so that it doesn't get confusing. So we're going to apply to each assignments. And as far as the thing that we are going to be applying to each for, it's going to be, and for assignments, we want the value assignments down here at the bottom. And then for each assignment, we are going to get the profile for that assignee ID. So we're going to do get profile, get user profile v2. We're going to put in the user ID here. So that's this one here, assigned to, not assigned by. And then we're going to append that information to our assignee variable. And so select our assignees. And for the value, you could get their entire user profile if you want that, just by putting in the body for the get user profile step like we did for the subtasks. But I only really need the name, so I'm just going to get the name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some JSON in here, assignee ID, and colon, and the ID of the user, assignee display name. And these all need to be surrounded in double quotes. And then close the brackets and rename this step. And then below our loops, so way at the very bottom here, we're going to compose both of these. And this is mostly for if you're going directly to a JSON file. So the create files step doesn't want to use these array variables as an input. So we just compose them first so that it can see them. So we're going to compose our subtasks and compose our assignees. All right, and then one more thing we need to get is our buckets. So the buckets information is like the vertical column in Planner. Usually use these for like a kind of status grouping. The bucket ID comes with the list tasks action that we have up here, but you don't have the bucket name. So we're going to add another step to get the bucket names. And that's just going to be the action called list buckets. So it's super easy. And you just select your group and your plan here. Which one was I even using? That one. All right, so I'm going to dump our buckets and our assignees and our subtasks into JSON files in SharePoint, and then we can connect those in Power BI. And you can do this a number of different ways, so you don't necessarily have to use JSON files. So there's also an action for creating a CSV table that you could use. I just use JSON because it makes the flow the most straightforward. So we're just going to add a couple create file steps here. So I'm going to kind of fast forward through this. We're just going to dump in the outputs of all of these steps into their own individual files. So select your site and your folder and then give it a file name. So we want whatever the thing is .json. All right, so for our buckets, we're going to use the body of the get buckets step. That one. Make sure you use the right body. There's a couple in there now. And the other thing you have to do with these is turn off chunking. So go to the ellipses menu here, settings, and disable this allow chunking. So that's going to let the flow overwrite the file when it runs so that it'll update it. And you can copy and paste these things. So I'm just going to copy and then paste it and then update the content. So this one's going to be assignees. And we're going to give it the compose assignees output. So I'm going to save this and run it, and then we're going to connect to our files in Power BI. All right, so that was successful. I'm going to go to our SharePoint site and check out our files. So if you remember from last time, what I like to do with these things is download them to my computer, connect to them in Power BI, and then update the path to point to SharePoint. And that way you avoid having to use the folder connector for individual single files, because it's really meant to be used more for combining a bunch of files that have the same structure. So I'm going to download these. And then in Power BI, we have our tasks here from last time. I'm going to import those files. I'm going to fast forward through this. You don't have to watch it all. So we do new source and select JSON and grab those files, and then we're going to join them all together. So if you remember how this works, we go to the ellipses menu here and then go to details and then click on more details. It's in the bottom right corner, so my video is going to be over. Let me move it over. Okay, so it's this one in the bottom corner here. So click on that and then copy the path right here. So we're going to paste this into the source step for our file, and that'll update it to point to SharePoint. So we go to the source gear menu here, click on it, and then paste in that file path. Click OK. So that updated it. I'm going to do the same thing for assignees and buckets, and I'll fast forward that. All right, so we got all of our sources pointed to SharePoint. That way we can automate this process. And now I'm going to join in our bucket information to our tasks. You should have a bucket ID in this table query. If you don't, just check your remove other column step and make sure you didn't remove that column because it is part of the return data from this connector. So we're going to go to merge queries. I'm going to put this at the bottom. So merge queries. Go to buckets and then select the bucket ID here and link it up to the bucket ID in your buckets table. Obviously you want to rename these column values. They're not very friendly right now, but what we want is this value ID here. I'm not going to just for the sake of speed, but you should. And then expand the bucket name. So it's this value name here. So that gets our bucket names into our tasks. And then the assignees works a little bit differently. So what I'm going to do for assignees is take our tasks query and I'm going to essentially make an assignments dimension because there can be multiple assignees per task. And if you expand out the assignment information in your tasks table, you'll end up with duplicate task rows and we don't want that. So I'm just going to duplicate this tasks query and I'm going to remove everything except for the task ID and the assignment column. So this is the task ID and value._assignments is the assignee information. So I'm going to right click, remove other columns, and then we're going to expand out this assignments. Expand to new rows, and then expand it again. You want the user ID here. This value one is what contains like the assigned by information, that kind of thing. We don't need that. So I just want the user ID. So this links our task ID and the assignee ID, and for clarity, I'm going to rename these so I don't confuse myself. So this is task ID, assignee ID, and I'm going to rename this table to assignments. And then I'm going to disable load of the assignees here because we're going to join that into this table. So turn that off, and then merge queries on your assignments and join the assignee ID to your assignees on the assignee ID column and expand out the display name. And then the other thing we probably want to do is go to our assignees and remove duplicates here because this is just a reference to which user display name is which assignee ID. We don't want multiples in here, so I'm just going to do a remove duplicates. All right, that gets our assignee information looking more reasonable. And now we need to do our subtasks. So the subtasks, we need to expand this information out to new rows and then expand the checklist column here, which has value, and you just expand this all out. All right, so we need to remove blanks on this ID field. So this is the subtask ID. So anything that has a blank subtask ID means it doesn't have subtasks. So we can remove those rows. So remove empty on that field. And then we probably don't need most of this information. So I'm going to leave in this ID. It is checked, tells you if the task is completed or not. And we could leave the last modified time. And then we definitely want to keep this ID column because this is going to be our task ID. So right click, remove other, and then update the names of these. This one is the task ID. And then set your column types. So this one's already text. I'm going to make this one whole number, this one true, false. Text, and this last modified time, it's text right now. We need to make it daytime time zone first because it had the time zone in it. And then we can make it date and do this as a new step. Don't replace existing. All right, so we got our tasks, our subtasks, our assignments. Now we need to relate all of these together in the model view. So I'm going to close and apply. All right, we're almost done. Let's go through and do our relationship. And my column names are terrible. But we want to relate the task ID here to the task ID over here, which was this value ID. So we want that. And I'm going to set this one to bidirectional here. So that'll let us display the information that we want together. Then for the subtasks, we have the task ID that we're going to relate in the same way. I we go. So one to many. And then if we want to stick this in a table, so the thing with the assignee information is because it's in a dimension table, you can use it as a filter with no problem. So you can, I'm going to rename this. So you can put this over here and use it as a filter on the page. If you want them to be displayed together, like comma separated assignee names in a visualization, then you need to concatenate the assignee names. So I'll show you how to do that in a minute. I'm just going to throw some information on our table so you have something to look at here. All right, so for the assignees, if you want them comma separated next to the task, you can add a calculated column for that. So I'm going to go to our tasks table, new column. We're going to do calculate concatenate X on assignments. We want the display name. What did I call it? Assignee. So this is going to be your name field there. And then for the delimiter, I'm going to do comma. Order by their name, I guess. Sending. So you can see one of these has multiple values. It's got a comma between them. I could put a space in there actually. And now we can drop that into our table visualization. And then our filter still works. So we can do this and it'll show you anywhere where my name is a part of the assignees column. And the subtasks get a little bit tricky to visualize. If you try and dump this all in a matrix, Power BI doesn't really love that because it likes to have actual calculations. But what you could do is maybe add a calculation for the percentage of subtasks complete or something similar to that. Or you could cross-filter two tables, so have your tasks cross-filter another visualization for your subtasks, however you want to do it, or Gantt chart, something like that. I hope this was useful. This was a lengthy one, so thank you for watching, and have a great day.